All right, welcome. Let's get right into it. Think of this as a high-intensity workout for your brain, designed to get you ready for your international economics exam. We're going to dive into 10 key questions that will help you really master the core concepts and, set you up for success. So, let's kick things off with this question. Ever wonder how a family vacation overseas, money that a worker sends back home, and a big decision on interest rates from the central bank are all linked? I mean, they sound totally disconnected, don't they? But they're actually all critical pieces of the exact same economic puzzle, the balance of payments. So here's our plan for today. First, we're going to unpack the current account. Then we'll get into the dynamics of how exchange rates move. After that, we'll tackle some of the more advanced theories that really separate the experts. And finally, we'll pull it all together into a final exam blueprint to lock in all this knowledge. Okay, let's do this. First up, the current account. This part is all about the accounting, really, getting it right when we track how money flows in and out of a country for the stuff we buy, the services we use, and the income we earn. So what is the current account, really? The best way to think of it is as the main scorecard for a country's financial dealings with the entire rest of the world. It's a record of everything, from imported cars to exported financial advice. It's broken down into 4 key parts, which we're going to look at right now. All right, let's put this into practice. Question 1 asks us to calculate the current account balance with this table. And it's actually pretty straightforward, which is nice. We just have to add up the 4 components. So we've got negative $30 billion for goods, plus $10 billion for services, another plus $10 billion for primary income, and then a minus $8 billion for secondary income. And that brings us to a grand total of negative $18 billion. Now, the most important thing here is that negative sign. What does it mean? It means this country has a current account deficit. Simple as that. More money flowed out than came in. Okay, let's build on that with question 3, which is all about classifying transactions. Now, this is where things can get a little bit tricky. For a country like Australia selling coal to China, well, that's obviously a goods export. Money comes in, so it's a credit. But what about an Australian family going on holiday in New Zealand? Well, from Australia's point of view, money is leaving the country to buy a service, that awesome holiday experience. So for Australia, it's a service import, which means it's a debit on their current account. Now, for that last piece of the current account puzzle, secondary income. Just think of these as one-way payments. Nothing is really sent back in return. The classic example, and the one you'll see a lot, is worker remittances. So in question 6, we have a Kenyan banker in India sending money home. For India, the country the money is leaving, it's recorded as a debit or a fall in its secondary income. This is a classic exam question, totally designed to trip you up. Which one of these is the odd one out? Well, trade in goods, services, and the 2 income streams, that's the heart of the current account. But buying foreign assets, like stocks or property overseas, that's different. That kind of transaction gets recorded in a different place, called the financial account. A simple way to remember it is this. The current account is like a country's daily spending and earning, while the financial account is more about its long-term investments. Okay, so we've nailed the accounting. Now let's get into the really dynamic stuff. What actually makes currency values move up and down. Section 2, exchange rates in motion. We're going to look at the mechanics behind it all. Question 2 brings us to the most fundamental principle of a floating exchange rate. And this graph shows it perfectly. In a floating system, the government doesn't set the value. It's not backed by gold, it's just pure market forces. The price of the currency, the exchange rate, is simply set where the demand for it meets the supply of it. That equilibrium point, that's it. So what makes those supply and demand curves actually shift? Question 7 gives us a perfect little chain reaction to look at. First, a country jacks up its interest rates. This acts like a giant magnet for what economists call hot money, foreign investors looking for a better return. To get that higher return, they have to buy the local currency. This, of course, pushes up the demand for it. And what happens when demand goes up? The price, the exchange rate, rises. The currency appreciates. Now for a concept that's a bit trickier, but it's so important to understand. Question 5 asks how a rising exchange rate could actually make a trade deficit worse. So the logic goes like this. A stronger currency makes foreign stuff cheaper for us to buy. Now, if we are really, really sensitive to price changes, what economists call having elastic demand, then a small price drop will make us buy a ton more imported goods. This huge jump in spending can totally overwhelm the benefit of the cheaper prices, and that causes the deficit to get even bigger. Okay, let's push on to the final conceptual part. This section is all about the advanced theories, the stuff that often shows up in the tougher exam questions and is really key to getting those top marks. First up, the terms of trade, or TOT. Now, it's super important not to confuse this with the balance of trade. The balance of trade is about value. The TOT, though, isn't about value, it's a ratio of prices. The formula is the index of export prices divided by the index of import prices times 100. It basically tells us how much buying power a country has on the world stage, how many imports it can buy for a certain amount of its exports. So let's actually apply this to question 4. Export prices go up by 50%, so our index is 150. Import prices go up by 25%, so their index is 125. We just plug those numbers into the formula. 150 divided by 125 times 100 gives us 120. And since that number is higher than our starting base of 100, we can say the terms of trade have improved.
All right, here is a rule you absolutely have to know in international economics. Let's say a country devalues its currency, hoping to make its exports cheaper and imports more expensive. But will it actually work? Well, question 9 is all about the Marshall-Lerner condition. It states that for a devaluation to actually improve the trade balance, the combined price elasticities of demand for both exports and imports has to be greater than 1. In plain English, it means that for the plan to work, people at home and abroad have to be pretty responsive to the price changes.
And building right on that last idea is the J-curve effect, our final question. This is a really fascinating theory you see in the real world. It suggests that even if the Marshall-Lerner condition is true in the long run, a country's trade balance often gets worse right after a devaluation before it gets better. Why does that happen? Because in the short term, people don't change their buying habits that fast. You've got pre-existing contracts, shipping times. It just takes time for everyone to react. So, right at the beginning, the country just ends up paying more for a similar amount of imports and the deficit gets deeper. And this graph shows exactly what we're talking about. Question 10 asks us to spot the J-curve. Well, the answer is B. You can clearly see the path. Right after the devaluation happens, the trade balance takes an immediate nosedive, worsening the deficit. Then, over time, as people adjust, it starts to recover and climb up, eventually moving into a surplus. It literally traces the shape of the letter J. Whew, we have covered a ton of ground at a really fast pace. So let's just take a breath and pull everything we've learned together into a really powerful revision tool, your own personal exam blueprint. Just look at how neatly all 10 of those questions fit into our 3 main pillars. We had 4 questions on the current account, 3 on exchange rates, and 3 on those key advanced theories. When you start organizing your revision like this, breaking down the massive topic into these smaller chunks, it becomes so much clearer and way easier to handle. So let's end with one last thought. Now that you understand all the mechanics, the balance of payments, exchange rates, these key theories, imagine you're a policymaker. If your country was facing a nasty, persistent trade deficit, which of these concepts or tools do you think is the most powerful for actually fixing it? That's when all this theory really meets the real world. Thanks for joining me and good luck with your studies.